Hello everyone, this is Agenda-Petersheim presenting on an examination of U.S. immigration detention centers as it relates to building a policy agenda based on the content discussed in my social problem and policy assessment paper. I hope you find it informative and enjoy. In building a policy agenda, there are challenges that one will face and are seen in 3 stages. The first is the diagnosing or listening stage, in which policy advocates must analyze streams of problems and solutions. Examining the U.S. detention centers points to a stream of problems and human rights violations. Some of these violations include the prevalence of sexual violence, forced sterilization, and inadequate access to medical and mental health care. As Jansen 2018 indicates, problems should not be identified without also looking into possible solutions. One solution that has already been proposed consists of reforming the U.S. immigration system under the Biden-Harris administration via the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021. Some of the key points of this legislation include offering pathways to citizenship that keep families together and embrace diversity, strengthening labor protections that will grow our economy and protect workers from exploitation, and promoting responsible securement of the U.S. border, which can be achieved by supplementing technology and infrastructure, protecting border communities, and addressing criminal activity. Other aspects of the diagnosing stage is to consider recent professional developments and trends, as well as political realities. Under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy surrounding illegal quote-unquote immigration that was enacted in 2018, which will later be explored at greater length, we saw a growing number of calls to action in support of immigrants across networks, including Capital Area Immigrants' Rights Coalition, grant makers concerned with immigrants and refugees, Southeastern University of Florida, Amnesty International USA, and Washington Farm and Labor Association, to name a few. Both of the U.S. major political parties have had considerable shortcomings in the realm of immigration policy the past 25 years, which have resulted in the mass incarceration of Latinx immigrants. However, xenophobic attitudes towards immigrants, particularly those who are undocumented, soared during Trump's presidency in direct correlation with his unabashed ideologies. While neither party has supported an influx of undocumented persons across our borders, Democrats have generally backed social justice issues, and more humanitarian approaches have been advocated for under the new presidency. Next, we move on to the softening stage. Jansen 2018 states that those who want decision makers to take their problem seriously have to convince them that it is a problem and not merely a condition that poses a threat or danger. The next few slides will verify how the U.S. immigration system is in fact a problem by discussing the micro, meso, and macro implications of human rights violations that arise from immigration detention centers. First, the consequences of failing to supply detainees with adequate medical and mental health care are apparent: death and suicide. Human Rights Watch 2018 found that unreasonable delays, poor practitioner and nursing care, and botched emergency response or substandard medical care lead to deaths in immigration centers. Following this assessment, it was determined that ICE's oversight of fatal detention had only weakened with time. As the quality of ICE's investigations on fatalities diminished, a pattern of suicide emerged in recent years due to the lack of mental health services available to detainees and the inappropriate use of solitary confinement. Next, research shows that emotional, psychological, and physical distress are typical symptoms or typical responses to abnormal events such as sexual violence or forced sterilization. It's also relevant to discuss, however, how these oppressive acts affect the individual and beyond. This impact extends to families and communities, i.e. the mesosystem, via secondary traumatic stress, or the emotional duress that people feel when they hear about the first-hand accounts of traumatic experiences. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, vicarious trauma can ripple through family relationships and impede optimal family functioning. Compound vicarious trauma with the fact that thousands of immigrant children have been displaced from their parents, yielding prolonged exposure to toxic stress, fear of abandonment, and the increased potential for attachment disorders. may irreparably damage the family unit. Finally, considering the role that epigenetics plays in the transmission of intergenerational trauma, the psychosocial and physiological issues that arise from immigration detention centers can have repercussions on future generations. The toxic stress that detainees are exposed to alters their DNA through the process of methylation, whose biomarkers are passed down from parent to offspring, creating predisposed risk for post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and depression. Additionally, because medical mistrust will likely heighten amongst immigrant communities following the forced sterilizations in Georgia, undocumented persons may further avoid seeking the health care they require until the need is dire. For that, the U.S. Latinx population will continue to face downstream social determinants of health. Despite these implications, there is hope for a better future. The proposed legislation under the Biden-Harris administration plans to restore U.S. immigration to a system of opportunity and one that places value on the lives of immigrants. As discussed in the diagnosing stage, there has been a great deal of political support from various entities demanding U.S. immigration system reform. The final stage to building a policy agenda is the activating stage, which includes utilizing tactics to pull an issue through the decision tunnel. Of the many strategies discussed by Jantz in 2018, the three that will be reviewed regarding the U.S. immigration system are timing and windows of opportunity, media coverage, and assembling early sponsors and supporters and routing. This last point actually consists of two strategies but have been combined in this presentation for the sake of efficiency. The time is ripe for specific initiatives. President Trump's anti-Latinx rhetoric and the measures he has taken to remove and prevent undocumented persons from entering the U.S. reached deplorable levels. Many across political parties were horrified to learn that thousands of immigrant children were separated from their families and unlawfully detained for extended periods of time in overcrowded cages under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy. In response to these horrors, among the others discussed in this presentation, the Biden-Harris presidential campaign established a platform to secure our values as a nation of immigrants, for which they vow to take urgent action to undo Trump's damage and reclaim America's values, modernize America's immigration system, welcome immigrants in our communities, and reassert America's commitment to asylum seekers and refugees, tackle the root causes of irregular immigration, and implement effective border screening. Media coverage has played a vital role in the momentum favoring immigration reform. During the 2020 presidential debate, Trump assigned blame to the Democratic Party for the devastating kids in cages phenomenon we have grown to associate with the Trump administration. Biden indicated that while Obama did build these structures, the Obama administration did not systematically separate parents from their children at the border, and these were only constructed to respond to the migration wave of 2014 to provide a more humane holding space for those being detained in U.S. custody, specifically for single adult men, not families and children. In addition to the presidential debate, press releases address Biden's campaign promises on immigration reform, and he continues to push in support of this legislation. Although not much momentum has been gained since the legislation was proposed back in February this year, as Congress.gov 2021 cites that this bill is still in the introduce stage, the latest action indicates that it was referred to the Subcommittee on Immigration and Citizenship on April 28, 2021. By routing the bill to this subcommittee, the outcome for this legislation may be favorable. Thank you.